First of all, I would like to thank you all for being here today, especially the speakers, even if it's still virtually. But at least at this point, I think we are all much more used to this kind of session, or at least I'm trying to be. The proposal for this session was always thought as a dynamic debate. We will try to stick as much as possible to this format, considering the limitations that the screen pose in the online format. So I hope the connection works well and the debate and interactions between the speakers can occur as smoothly as possible. So for today, the proposal is to promote a debate around the topic Mediterranean migration governance from state-centric to city-centric, exploring alternative pathways. And for this debate, we are lucky enough to count with two experts on the field, Carmen, Geha on one side and Gemma Alborel on the other. Carmen is an activist and associate professor of public administration at the American University of Beirut. She specializes in mass political mobilization and the challenges to political reform across the Arab Middle East and North Africa. She's also a co-founder of the Center for Inclusive Business and Leadership for Women at the American University of Beirut, a regional reference on reading gender inclusive employer policies across the whole region. She's also a co-founder of Kadid Beirut, the Shake Up, a network of 150 plus experts implementing a community-driven roadmap for the recovery of Beirut following the port explosion on August 4th. Carmen is also regularly advises and consults the top international organizations such as UN agencies and government institutions across the region. She has worked in Libya, Myanmar, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and Iraq, among other places. And Carmen also holds a PhD in international relations from the University of St. Andrews. She was the 2018-2019 fellow in social science at the Institute for Advanced Study. On the other side, we have Gemma Alborel, and she's currently head of Mediterranean Relations and European Network Service in the Ministry for Foreign Action, Institutional Relations and Transparency at the Government of Catalonia. She has been involved in the Interdisciplinary relations since 1989. She was director of the program department at EMED, where she worked till 2008, and the former head of program and networks unit of the Anna Lindh Foundation for the Dialogue Between Cultures in Alexandria, Egypt, during 2009 and 2016. She's also the editor, co-author, and author of books and articles on the topics related to civil society, migration, intercultural dialogue, and Euro-Mediterranean relations. So now that I have briefly introduced you the speakers, I will give a brief introduction to the topic that we'll be dealing today and the questions that we may aim to tackle throughout this debate. So just that you know the organization of the debate, the session is thought, as I mentioned, to provoke interaction between Carmen and Gemma. So we'll have 2 rounds of questions, comments, and reactions, and a final round for conclusions. The audience can send questions whenever they feel like, and we will get all the questions together at the end, and we'll have more or less 15 minutes to try to address these questions at the end. So feel free to send the questions whenever you feel like. For those that are here at Zoom and also in YouTube, we will cover all the questions that you sent. So moving to the framework of the debate. So as most of you probably know, the Mediterranean is a region highly affected by complex migration dynamics. Such phenomena have diverse causes and consequences for the multiplicity of actors involved and is currently a central and multidimensional policy issue. The European Union, alongside its member states, have been key actors in the Mediterranean migration governance, mostly because they are the main interested in managing and controlling such phenomena. This means that migration has been above all a matter of high politics, something handled by traditional politics at the state level or higher governance stances. There is, however, growing criticism toward the policies carried out by state actors, pointing out mainly their incapacity of producing proper and sustainable solutions. Consequently, many voices call for moving beyond this state-centric model, considered insufficient for tackling the issue of migration in all its complexity. On the one hand, you have some voices claiming the necessity of setting forth a constructive migration policy based on a multilateral approach and a regional approach that could foster true cooperation between North and South shores. Nowadays, it is more about EU multi-level governance being projected in the neighborhood than a joint work of North and South actors in a truly supranational or regional arena. On the other, some voices argue for the importance of Mediterranean cities and regions. They underline how migration is above all an urban phenomenon, and how cities and regions have been increasingly claiming their space in the management of migration and diversity. So the general premise in this sense is that moving either upward or downward in the governance continuum would imply paradigmatic changes. So what is up for discussion is whether moving in those directions is either possible, feasible, or desirable. Moreover, it should be considered the advantages and disadvantages of this decentralization and regionalization to all the parts involved, including the most vulnerable ones. Therefore, the purpose of this roundtable is twofold. First, to discuss Mediterranean migration governance at different scales and considering the roles of regions, states, cities. And second, to debate the Mediterranean region making from this multiple perspective, trying to go beyond the Euro and state centers. So the idea is to foment what we think is the most needed debate about the similarities and differences between these different levels of governance, as well as advantages, disadvantages, and possibilities of overcoming this state-centric framework that predominates migration governance. So this is a first look at the topic, but they are the experts and they will give you a much more nuanced and deeper look at the topic. And in this first round of intervention, I would like to invite Carmen and Geha to keep introducing the topic and situating the debate, mainly by explaining the nature, how they see the nature of Mediterranean migration governance, if there has been or is underway a change of paradigm in migration governance, and what has changed, for example, during these 25 years after the Euromed partnership was launched in Barcelona, and since when and how this debate about decentralizing and multi-level Mediterranean governance became relevant, and what are these different levels of governance that we're talking about, and what it supposes in terms of policymaking and policy implementation. So I would like to invite Geha, if you would like to begin with your presentation, and then we'll have Carmen's comment on your presentation.
Okay, thank you very much, Luisa, and thank you, Ricard and Elisabetta and Niemet for inviting me in this session. I'm really glad to participate in this debate also with Carmen, that I followed some time ago. And because I'm here just in this mix of interest of research of the matter and also as practitioner myself in this networking and governance, subnational governance issues. So I will mix a little bit my two proposals. No, it's let me say some key points that I consider interesting, just to give you some approaches also from the experience. No, I think first of all, I put myself the question mark: is something happening? And when this happens, that we start to really consider that the regional and local authorities or realities became an actor with this will to be present in these migration issues, no? And I think, and this is also a question to be discussed, but I think the big change is in 2015 with the refugee crisis. For me, this is really the starting point of a change of our way to see how inefficient is not only the state's policies, but even us from the point of view of Europe, the difficulties of coordination of the European policies. So in this moment, in 2015, begins, let me say, a process that you will see with some examples, start to put on the first round, the civil society and the regions and the cities claiming for better policies on the matter. What happened after is, as you know very well, in 2020, the new Pact of Migration and Asilo tried to get the best of the responses to this situation, but also provokes a kind of reactions, and we can see exactly in this framework the difficulties and the opportunities that I think there are also some opportunities. And just to be very recent matter of discussion, there is 1 month ago, the Commission and the European Union launched the communication on the new agenda for the Mediterranean, that is a new step forward, the neighborhood policy in the region, also taking into consideration this new approach on the migration. So I think this is the context we are talking about, and something happens in this period that makes also the question relevant that we are talking about. Which 2 or 3 things I think change in this panorama, no? The first, I think, there is a new idea about the coordination between internal and external dimension of migrations. For me, this mix that we are not talking about something border control, something about integration, something happens that now the communications, the politics needs to take into consideration the both issues together. So in this kind of approach, the actors change their position, and the cities and regions are not only for internal matters, they pretend to be also actors in this new external and internal dialogue for migration agenda. Also, I think it is a new balance between solidarity and responsibility. Till that moment, perhaps solidarity is a question of NGOs or civil society, and responsibility is about institutions. Now we see how the cities and regions take the leads on this new narrative about solidarity. So something happens, you can be responsible and at the same time being solidarity. And this is something that even the institutions need to take into account, but it has been led, according to my understanding, by the local and regional authorities. And also, there is a big focus now in the partnerships with the third countries and with the countries of origin. We pass to this idea of co-development or control of borders with new ways to do this. And for this, in 2016 also we have the Global Compact for Migration, and this is also a very relevant fact. We start to talk about legal migration in a different way, in a very much more wider perspective. So finally, what happened at that moment? That some networks of cities, networks of regions start to react in a very important way. For example, one of the most relevant networks of regions in Europe, that is the CRPM, that is a network of peripheral and maritime regions, and it's a very important lobby at the European Commission from the point of view of regional institutions, start for the first time to have to open the field of migration. Because till that moment, regional authorities were a little bit hesitating about to have the opinion, because this is a competence of the state, because for me, because I need to take into consideration what is my position now. This debate is open till there is 1 year, 20 regions, European regions, start to, they did a letter addressed to the European Commission, claiming for criticizing some points of the new Pact of Migration and Asylum. So we have that the actors put themselves. Also in question of local authorities, we have also that the CGLEU, the big network of cities, start to also a program of Mediterranean cities for migration. Also, we have that there is a new network of region for networks and intercultural dialogue in Europe put in place. All these questions have not been seen before 2015. And in addition of new paths of in the question of solidarity. For example, we can see now how in 2050 Barcelona put themselves of the plan of refugee city as this plan of the refugee city of Barcelona, that other cities in Europe start to claim themselves or to manifest themselves like this. Valencia, Catalonia, they are claiming also with new plans for refugees, asking for new ways and asking for more competencies to receive refugees and to have a new narrative about solidarity. And also the Basque Country started with a very important program at a European level, asking for the reallocation and redistribution of asylum seekers according to the, I don't know, economical conditions of each region. In summarizing all this, there is a big movement of regions and cities claiming to be actors in all this issue. Even in the global compact of migration, it is another mechanism. It's the major mechanism asking for more implication of the mayors and the cities and the regions. So this happens at the level of the actors. At the same time, in the European Parliament, also not for the first time, but in a very clear way, there is the idea that regions and local authorities can receive direct funds for deal better and more efficient directly with the problems that they are need to resolve on the field. So there is some instruments, financial instruments, that have been now asking for these new funds. And the European Parliament is saying, okay, this new instrument for neighborhood funds need to take into consideration regional and local authorities in order to them and to facilitate to them to receive these funds in order to deal in more efficacy with the problems that they need to do and they need to manage. At the same time, there are fundings and programs like led by DG Home, like the AMIF project, that need to be much more efficient in order to provide to the local and regional authorities projects and programs aiming to deal with this question. Just for give you an example, this AMIF program, that is the program from the DG Home, a call for proposals to lead with the question of the legal migration. So we are 22 in the last call in 2020. There is 222 beneficiaries, and only 15 regions and local authorities are involved in this kind of projects. So there is still a lack of the regions and the local authorities to be present in the mechanism of fundings to develop projects and more efficient funds, no? To be much more to impact much more on the field. So, in resume, I think this moment allows us to say that yes, there is a movement, a momentum that we need to take into consideration these new actors. And just to resume a question that seems to me very relevant in the Euro-Mediterranean region, that is that this new agenda that there is 1 month appears like the new frame for our relations between the neighborhoods, the neighbors in the Mediterranean region. It's true that follows the pattern of the pact, the European policies regarding external, internal, and claiming for legal migration, but still nothing say there, or nothing, no reference to local, regional authorities or how to deal with this possibility to the key question. That is, I finalize with this. The key question in all this context is according to my understanding, the idea of multi-level governance. In this such context, is not a question of decentralization, or not a question of how the regions can implement or the local authorities can implement. The key issue is that now we know that it cannot be managed without this intersection of local authorities, regional authorities, national authorities, and European policies, and the inclusion of social, civil society, and private also interest. So this is this question: how we can provide instruments for this multi-level governance be efficient enough to deal with this common challenge of migration. I think I resume a little bit some ideas.
Thank you very much, Gemma. I think it's a good introduction. Carmen, do you have some reactions considering Gemma's presentation?
Yeah, thank you so much. First of all, I'm so glad to be here. Thank you for giving me the chance to reflect on this research. It's a very important day today. It's exactly 10 years since the Syrian conflict and the largest refugee crisis in the world since World War II. I'm very pleased to be with you, Gemma, given your very long experience on issues that are important and, in my opinion, are key to solving the refugee crisis. I don't work on Europe, although I'm increasingly interested in looking at the EU policies and the programs and the tools that we can use to leverage our voice here. So I won't comment from too much. I'll just tell you where I'm coming at this from. I'm an academic, but I'm also an activist. I worked a lot in civil society, particularly around issues of refugee protection. And I'm interested in questions of how we do not leave it to political will to supersede the human life. How do we create the basic foundations of human life, of relationships, of safety, of education, of jobs? And I do believe what you presented as a framework, Gemma, pushes us to think further about what we can be doing, even if we are on two different sides of the Mediterranean, to have a dialogue around this internal, external. The case of Lebanon is not a good case, although Antonio Guterres in 2017, Al-Koti says Lebanon is a key pillar in the international framework for the protection of Syrian refugees. Without it, the entire system would collapse. And I don't think he could be more wrong, because I don't think there is a worse country that treats refugees. I don't think there is a worse country that doesn't even recognize them as refugees. I mean, the title of my presentation is Living in Hell. And I didn't create the word. It was the president of our republic on September 10 that told people that Lebanon is going to hell. So how could this small country hosting, the largest refugee per capita in the world without really any refugee policy move from a hell of a situation into being a global pillar? And I think that one way that Lebanon does that, although I don't advocate for it, I don't think it's good. I think that we sit in very different places, Gemma, whereas you are advocating, or maybe this is how I heard you and we can discuss it, probably the approach that you're saying is cities and mayors and civil society have to have a bigger role. It's not enough the state. In my part of the world and research, it's the complete opposite. I think that we have so many lessons learned around civil society and communities and municipalities, doing so much to contribute to refugee protection. But also, like any crowded city, there's also been a big backlash. Right now, after 10 years in the crisis, my biggest interest in this topic is starting to think about return or non-return. So what happens with patterns of forced migration? How do we, again, my question, I don't have the answer. How do we make sure that we are respecting human dignity and human life and not placing people under the whim of political will that can send them back in buses to places where they can die, or that can push them, like we saw in the city of Tripoli in Lebanon, to get into boats and die in the sea? How do we do that? How we don't leave people's not just presence, because their present situation is a hell of a situation. And I can talk about this more. I believe there is a chance, Luisa, for me to kind of present, but right now just commenting. So what I'm very interested in is how do we learn from this past 10 years, particularly around the Syrian crisis, which is what I work on, to make sure that people's future, refugee future, is not in the hands of political bickering. Because increasingly what is happening here, and I followed a little bit what happened in Europe in 2015, is this policy of threat, right? Threat of repatriation, threat of securitization, threat of isolation, basically allowing politics to supersede the human life and human dignity. So I would like to take what you said, Gemma, and your very long experience and the perspectives that you have put, that you're saying right now is part of the new Mediterranean policy, this new pact on immigration, and ask us to talk more and find ways to coordinate that is beyond documenting lessons learned, but taking the best out of what Lebanon has to offer, because I believe communities did a lot, and the worst, because I believe politicians and the political system have done the worst, to maybe try to find a middle ground that would create a conversation between our two cities and our two institutions that can provide a minimum of human life and not allow politics to continue sending people to hell. I mean, it is, I don't think in anyone in the history of the world there has been a president. It's not my opinion. It's not my neighbor, my friend saying you guys are going to go to hell. This is a president of a country. And so I feel a sense of responsibility to think out loud with you, to criticize a little bit the resilience narrative. I think particularly around education, I can present when my turn comes, but I think we have been, too much romantic about resilience. I mean, how much resilience should kids and young people and adults exhibit? We need to stop creating the conditions that pushes people to be resilient and start creating basic minimum conditions for human life. And I think we do that by bringing our voice together, again, within this internal, external, looking back and thinking, what the next 10 years are going to look like? What's going to happen to these people? And so I'll stop at that, just to say I'm so inspired, and to thank the organizers for putting us together, because I think that your experience can shed light on things we don't see when we do research. And I'll bring in some findings, and I'll tell you what I've been thinking about and working on. But my hope is we can take the best out of Lebanon and the worst, and make sure that we replicate the best, but together we fight to prevent the worst, to limit this monster that is stepping on people's lives. So thank you. I'll stop at that, unless Luisa, you want me. Yeah.
No, thank you, Carmen. Thanks a lot. I don't know if Gemma, do you want to react? And then in the second round, you can go deeper in your cases. And I think we can give more space in the second round for your presentation, Carmen, and then you can present your findings, and then Gemma also from her perspective. So if Gemma, you want to...
I think because what says Carmen is so important. I think one of the problems we have, I don't know what you think, Carmen, but is that we are not aware about how different our reality is. We are very concerned about our refugees here in Europe. When your country, how many refugees at that moment? Because we are talking more than 1 million refugees. Sometimes we are talking even 2 million refugees all at the same moment, and challenging societies like the Lebanese one, and putting in a big stress as identity, as management, as with the big issue, no? So we are here in Europe trying to apply with politics that can be efficient for us, that can be much more humanitarian and much more, let me say, speaking a language that can be much more understood by the public opinion and civil society, but still in our comfort zone and not very well aware about that. The key reality is that your societies are not only sending migrants, let me say, but also suffering a big challenge regarding this issue. So here, I think we start with this such a problematic dualist point of view, that because you, Luisa, you ask us what changed from the first 25 years ago, the Barcelona concerns is about security, mobility as a big terms of security. After a little bit about migration, but after that, it has been the 11th September, it has been all these refugees, all this Middle East war. So the reality completely changed, and we have been forced, because the big challenge, a little bit, as I explained, to change a little bit, because this new agenda that I am referring you, the new agenda nada, the new agenda nada de nada. O sea, it's just a new tool to be comfortable with this. But I think what Carmen say is referring is the key point. If we don't do an effort to find a common ground that is really common between the two realities that are different, but at the same time challenging by the same global question. So till this moment is not happening, we will just pretend to do politics, Euro-Mediterranean politics, when we are doing European policies open to the... And what happened, that also I join Carmen in this, is that local authorities and regional authorities, we are authorities, or they are authorities, so they are not changing the... But I think here there is a window of opportunity. But what we say with the local authorities and with the regions have been a movement of solidarity. But this movement of solidarity has not been effective at all, because in Catalonia we are claiming to have much more active with refugees. We are putting in place programs, but nothing, 100, 200, 300 refugees, this is nothing. No? So what we try to say is much more instruments, efficient instruments. And finally, I insist, I think perhaps I didn't explain this well. Multi-level governance is not that now state politics will be done or implemented by local authority or cities, or no. Multi-level governance applies to a new way to work with complex matter that it's also a SDO objective, no? Is to make governance a really effective tools with all the actors involved and working together. You cannot imagine how we cannot participate in things that are happening in our space, no, in our territory, and we need just to wait for Brussels or Madrid or Lebanon at the same case, no. So it's not that now is replacing the policies, the state policies need to be replaced by the local policies. No. Is that a new framework of governance should be done. And this is not only the same for migration, it's for all the matters that are now global. We cannot deal with this European scheme anymore. So what Carmen says now, I think is the key point, because the key point is that we don't understand exactly what happened in these societies. So our politics and our instruments will not be efficient enough to resolve this.
And I just want to comment, because I was going to say, I like what Geha said. I want to say that I think that in extreme tragedy, we can find solidarity and we can find solace. And it has been a year of tragedy for Lebanon. And having this conversation, I think that we need to, it's important what you said, but I think you will be helping us if you made us feel less victims. Yani I want to get out of the issue of numbers, right? Lebanon hosts 1 million, why Europe doesn't host more, into, well, what can we learn from these people? From refugee communities and host communities, and how can we build together, and how we don't repeat mistakes, and how we can take these tragedies and lessons to design better programs. It will make us feel that we have a story to tell beyond the numbers, that yes, we are suffering, our economy is suffering, into flipping it a little bit. And also what I would recommend in the talk is having refugee voices also think about their presence and their future. I think it will bring light to the tragedy and bring a face to the name. And I think it will be a more fruitful discussion. So rather than saying, let us join forces, I'm going to consider we join forces, all of us, and you will find many, many people like me in the region working on this with the desire to get out of the cycle, the trap of either give us money because we have too many, but we take all the money and our government steals it, or please take more numbers, into another conversation, how we don't let politics destroy human life. And I see there is Lamia in the chat about politicization of the refugee crisis. I'll just respond quickly. Part of the politicization of the crisis in Lebanon is because Syria is very political for the Lebanese. So for politicians who don't agree on the nature of the conflict in Syria, they don't agree on the nature of all of these people that came. So it is political, Lamia. I'm not saying I want it to be, but it's so political. So how do we think together to prevent the politics from, the minimum requirements of human life, of having shelter, going to school, getting access to a job, and maybe, getting a visa one day. So I'll just stop at that. Thank you, Geha.
Thank you very much. I think this first round already gave us a very nice look of what this debate is going to look like. So I think you already entered in the second topic, which I would like encourage you to go deeper and go into your experiences. So I would like to encourage you to keep on this direction and relate your visions and experience related to this multi-level governance within the Mediterranean, mainly relating and describing what you were already talking about, the advantage and the disadvantage that maybe sometimes from the European side we take for granted, that given like powers or I don't know, a bigger roles to cities or regions is necessarily and always good, however it is done. And maybe from Carmen's experience, she has a totally different vision from the Lebanese. So I think it would be nice to hear that. And I would actually encourage you to think about if the solution passes through these multi-leveling. So keep on discussing if what you're already doing, right? To think about if multi-leveling is the solution, or to bring in new narratives on migration, bringing a new way of policy making and policy implementation. That's what Geha was talking about, right? It's not about just cities being involved, but a totally different way of doing migration governance and migration policies. So if you want to start, Carmen, you have the floor, and 10 minutes, 12 minutes, and then Geha, we do the other way around, and Geha can react and we keep the debating. But it's great how we're doing. So feel free to interrupt each other and just...
Okay, so I'll try to do like Geha because she was very clear. I'll tell you what I've worked on, and then maybe from it we can deduce, we can take ideas about multi-level governance. First of all, yes, of course, I am in favor. This is not only a state responsibility. If you have a good state, that's great, but also states are not always good and are not always able to deal with these issues. So I'll tell you a bit what I worked on about living in hell and refugees living in hell. If you have questions about the context, you can ask me later, like the numbers, where they are, what is happening. But I just want to warn about some of the findings that emerge from the research and the activism. Concepts, they become policy tools, and they are very dangerous policy tools. So I have a work that's looking at the resilience narrative, and I've published quite a bit at this, saying, look, what is resilient is political institutions, politicians, not people, okay? The refugee crisis in Lebanon strengthened a corrupt sectarian system. It gave them an excuse, okay? They were able to justify their standing with the international community and cope with this crisis. So be careful with programming around resilient communities. I argue that this can, I understand where you're coming from in Spain, because you don't have as bad a political system, but be careful, because the downside of multilateral governance could mean misplaced responsibility. So the local municipal versus the state, whose job is it to put kids in school or to take care of gender-based violence? So this is one thing to be careful about. And second, not to replace state strategy with short-term responses and short-term planning. It is one thing to host a farmer market and get the community engaged together, etc. But it's another thing to dump responsibility all on the local level. And short-term planning can come at the expense of much needed immigration reform that the world needs today. So we have to be careful not to absolve the state from its responsibilities. And the third thing that happened in Lebanon of resilience is fostering the status quo in return of aid and funding. And what happened in the last year is not only that status quo was maintained, but they left explosives at the port, and they beat up people, and they burnt tents. So, and they stole all of the depositors' money. So there's a problematic relationship between resilience that is celebrated. Like if you go on the UN, you see a picture of, you know, somebody going to school with their backpack, and this resilience communities. Actually, what is shadowing, what it is clouding, is misplaced responsibility, short-term planning, lack of reform, and using aid to manipulate, to exploit state standing. Again, I know this is the Middle East side, not Spain side, but maybe there's just something to think about keeping the state very present, but engaging different partners, engaging civil society. On another side, so thinking about concepts is this issue of the UN in the region and UNHCR, and I know that it's not the same. It's not the same in Europe, But why I'm saying this is that important, we always rely on international agencies to design the shape. They tell us like, this is the project, this is how things should be. UNHCR stopped registering new births since 2015 in Lebanon of Syrian refugees. Okay, it's my government that asked this, and I'm not absolving them from their duty. I protest all the time against my government, but this is UNHCR. So what you talked about, Geha, in terms of the numbers, you were very right. 1 million, 1.5 million, 500,000, 2 million. Actually, we don't know. And worse than we don't know the monolithic numbers, the total numbers, we also don't know the different types of people and needs and priorities and classes and genders. So this is very problematic, and this is where our collaboration and thinking together is to bring a name to a face and a name and a story to these issues. So keep in mind, resilience, the issue of the UN is not something that we can rely on all the time. I did quite a bit of work on education. This was a project with the Norwegian Research Council, and PRIO in Oslo, as well as colleagues at Harvard Graduate School of Education, led by Sarah Dryden. And for about 18 months, we sat with students in the 9th grade in Lebanon, and the 9th grade is the French brevet, like it's the cutoff year between, kind of mandatory schooling. Many kids leave at that age to go work or to just, school dropouts. So we followed students and did like an ethnography with the families just to understand the intersection of education. And here also, I have to tell you, politics politicized and superseded the human life, because kids were going to school, yes, in the afternoon shifts, but they were not able to use their time in schools to imagine a plausible future. One of our findings and a paper that we're working on right now, it's called, "What do refugee young people want their teachers to know?" And it's sad, but they want their teachers to know that they aspire for a better future. So there is an imagined future, right? I want to travel, I want to get married, I want to find a job, I want to go to Europe, I want to open, a car shop. But then there is a plausible future between what is imagined and what is realistically possible for them, given their positionality. And I think maybe a refugee in Spain or Europe may have this imagination and plausibility closer than a refugee here. And then what can we think together to make their imagined futures a bit more plausible? So thinking also about aid and education and imagination and future as a concept and what that means. I'll close with something dear to all of our hearts, this issue of gender, okay? Also, concepts become policy tools, but I'm not sure how much our policies all over the world, but particularly because I am with an EU audience, I don't know how much our policies are nuanced. I don't know how much we are listening, it's very cliche to refugee voices about what they want and what they need. Right now, there is a big debate about return. I'm talking particularly around Syrian refugees, and the Syrian regime hosted a very big conference not 2-3 months ago saying Syria is safe, send them back. And this conversation is very ideological, at least in Lebanon and the Middle East, right? So if you like the Syrian regime, you believe everybody should return. If you dislike and consider the regime an enemy, then you don't want anybody to return. So again, it's ideology and politics clouding, superseding, stepping on human life, okay? People's tents getting burnt, people not being able to register their newborns. So what I think needs to be done as part of my book project is, juxtaposed to these big security events, political events, the Barcelona conference, the Global Compact, what is happening? Who are these people? What do they want? And I'll just share, a couple of quotes around, return, right? And people are citing, and, fear of persecution, incarceration, torture, disappearance, death, okay, at the border, but they also cite things like economic concerns, okay, belonging, going back, okay. I asked one activist, and she says, yes, I dream about going back every day. I wish I could stop dreaming about it. I dream about it all the time, but it will never be home. It cannot be home again. To her, Syria is a black box, and the ones who go out may never go back in. And for people like me, going back in will be suicide. And I'm sure she's not the only one. Let's call her Rima. I'm sure she's not the only one. So what are we doing as members of policy and government and research in order to paint policies for the future that take care of different people's needs. Well, again, I'm not saying that you need to be helping Lebanon. I'm saying let's listen to each other and find a way that we are being nuanced in our approach and not just getting these policy tools and kind of, you know, giving them to local authorities or to civil society who may be doing a lot, but still you will need, you know, you will need the government. One more quote just to nuance it even further. From a woman again. She says, life in Beirut made me more vocal, more open about my sexuality, my activism through art and writing. I can't imagine going back, she says, even with all of the guarantees in the world. The regime gases its own people. Besides, even if a hypothetical scenario occurs and there could be peace, my neighborhood would not accept me back in the way that I've become. So again, this is a 10-year crisis, a decade crisis. What are we doing to not allow ideology and people and politics to kill people, basically, to stop any source of life for them? And also, what have we learned in 10 years that can nuance trajectories of return or stability or visa or immigration? And because you are working on the EU, what can you do as a policymaker, Geha, to make sure that whenever you're designing interventions, you're just taking into consideration the different human experiences and not being stuck on the numbers, the ideology, and this, you know, this kind of guilt feeling that people should care. And no, you know, we are in a pandemic and an economic recession. People are caring just as much as they can. You know, authorities who have taken it upon themselves to design these schools should be the ones caring more than us. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, Carmen, for this very nice presentation. Well, Geha, if you'd like to intervene, I think I just want to say that you added another scale, no, to the debate, because I'm talking about regions, cities, and of course there's the people. No, in the end, migration is about people, and it's well, it's nice that you put it out there. And but I'll let Geha to reflect
Bueno,
upon.
claro, es que Carmen put the debate in the right direction. That is the key question. I will try to come back with some reflections in order to the concretion. No, but for me there is something that it's not. I'm not surprised by this, but it's really important. Carmen, let me tell you that I have the opportunity to know your country, and for me, Lebanon is always a key laboratory. I don't know if it's hell or it's heaven, but for me, it's so interesting because you have a society that is really alive, and that even if the system is not responding, and because your situation and a lot of issues, you are always providing ideas that are enlightening a lot a society. So let me tell you this positive thing, because I'm fully aware that you are not living on this, but as a positive for me, always the Lebanese approach provide me for a light of ideas. No? Having said that, you tell us about human all the time, and I think we need to take note of this. The debate about migrations is a debate that finalized to talk about citizenship as our main goal. All of us, we want to be, or we are citizens and whatever, no? But it's always need to accompany this question of human approach, no? So I think you put the point on a very, very important issue. Human, citizens, individual. Then it's not only talking about rights, it's talking about identities, but at the end of the day, as Luisa say, it's people. It's someone having an history. But do you know, lo más gracioso de esto is that when you are dealing with any program dealing with migration in the European Union, they always suggest to you to talk about the narrative of the stories of the people, about what has happened. So this is an instrument to reach this reality, but always it's instrumental. It's not really the focus. It's instrumental, not it's the focus. So for me, something that I take notes and it's really important is this dichotomy between human being and citizen. And this is something that we need to introduce in our in our strategies as something important to deal with. At the same time, I think there is this internal and external, but coming to the internal management of migrations, you are talking about the internal management in Lebanese society and our internal management in our realities. I think it is a need to share this experience between these internal management experiences, because what happened at the end of the day for an European city or region is that we need to deal with housing, with urban, with health, with education, for persons who has legal status, or for the ones that are with an irregular status, with minors without or in the limbo of their status. All of these, we cities, we regions, we need to deal in our daily politics life or instruments. So you in Lebanon, I suppose it's the same, no? Your city in Beirut or your whatever needs to deal with problems related to housing, education, whatever. So there is something there in the internal management that needs to take into account the possibilities, the funds, the instruments, and politics can be better if they are more efficient. No? So I think when I talk about this city networking and whatever at the level of the Mediterranean that are having these debates, the debates are how we can deal better with this problem that we have about our internal management regarding migration. So I think we need to find a way that this internal common challenge be seen as internal common challenge, because usually we think that we European, we have our internal management things regarding migration, and these Mediterranean countries, they are the sending countries, no? Perhaps the transition of, yes, perhaps they have some questions about some migrations internal, but we are not conscious that these countries, these cities are dealing in a different context that is not the European context. So in addition of this, so here it is my question also for you. Don't you think that in this external dimension, I think it's interesting that this dialogue between the both realities have been much more encouraged by the instruments. So no encounters that it seems like interconfessional encounters between mayors or between presidents, no, encounters between practitioners, and because we have encounters between researchers, we have encounters between authorities, but we don't have these instrumental, let me say, people working with, for example, there is a very important issue now in the demanding of this local and regional dimension, that is, we are dealing with education. Why we cannot put this education cooperation between both tackling the issue of migration in this, you know? So I think we need to encourage the innovative way to do this external or this cooperation between us. And well, you say the approach of the global institutions, and I think you are fully right. But how we can do to face that the global debate is there and the international institutions are dealing with this, and then we, at the local level, we need to manage. So this dialogue between the big brother and us as practitioners on the ground need to be solved. And we have only this instrument of civil society, of networking. I think in this multi-level governance, the question of networking is really important. We don't need to be decentralized or in the global and doing whatever the international institution is saying. We need to work with the practitioners, with the institutions on the ground by networking and doing this. And finally, I think there is an issue there about the future and the youth. This is the future, the youth and education. I think, well, and gender, of course, of women, but I think youth, talking in a comprehensive way, es que we don't know, es que I think we don't realize how equal, o sea, how similar a young people from Beirut and a young person from Barcelona is exactly the same concerns and the same ideas because they are related to the same, I don't know, cosmovision of the. The only thing is that the person in Beirut face a context, an institutional reality that needs for them to be much more activism or not, and the person in Barcelona has another. But I think we don't understand that new generations are born exactly with the same expectations and with, so just finalizing with this divorce between politicians and persons and people, I think it's impossible to maintain. It's impossible because the new generations will never accept this divorce between their institutions and their will to be the same and to be exactly with the same expectations that anyone in the world. So there is where we have the possibility to put in place, not because the regional or local authorities are the best, not because sometimes also we need to ameliorate a lot over, because in somehow everything is authority, no? No, it's because at the local level, perhaps we have more the possibility to be much more aware and to be much more active. It's the only thing, perhaps, no? Perhaps. And to participate much more close to this. But I think the future and the youth, it's clear. We can do this in a good way with this governance tool and putting a little bit the action in this Agenda 2030 and this new way to perhaps, or we will do in a bad way. That way means what's happening now in Barcelona with our youth. It's not necessary to go to Beirut to have revolutionary episodes in our society. So all politicians are taking care of this human, put the education tools and see the real human part of this history, of they will be the past by the, but everyone, because as Luisa say, we are putting this in a way that it's not a question of authorities, local, regional, or national. It's a question of politics and situation. But perhaps here, because the debate is to discuss this, we can work better in this multi-level governance can a little bit help in this, perhaps, no? I think, I'm convinced of this a little bit.
Can I say something, Luisa?
Yes, of course, we can do like quick reactions by both of you, and then we move to the conclusions, but we still have time.
Okay, so very quickly, Gemma, I agree. I think multi-level governance require multi-stakeholder and multi-expertise conversation. What you said about operating in silos is very important. I mean, you said that the researchers do it, but not so much, huh? The political scientists, they talk to the political science, education people talk to education. After the explosion, it was very clear, because we were running out of time, that unless we all talk together, the youth, the athletes, the artists, the doctors, the nurses, the academics, the scientists, unless we sit together, we cannot figure it out. So I agree with you very much. I think if we want to engage many stakeholders, we need to have a discussion that is multi-expertise. There is no reason why we're not discussing health and education and environment and jobs. There is no reason why we are stuck in what we know, right? And I think that with the pandemic and with recession on both sides of the Mediterranean, the way to deal with these issues of Big Brother is to stop working in silos on purpose and to start creating institutional models that can be scalable. Like an example, right? I mean, if you're saying Barcelona wants to be the refugee city, great. Now write this example, make it obvious to the world, right? And let it be an example that can be scaled. And this is where my part of the world will start to find meaning, because, you know, our politicians blackmail the EU. They tell them, look, we have so many, we can send them. To overcome this narrative, we need to look for models. If they are bad, let's try to fix them by advocating together for better policies. And if they are good, let us document them and find a way to scale them. So let us find a healthcare clinic, you know, that is not racist, that treats everybody well, or a school, or a teacher, or whatever, and write that story and share that story, and then tell the Big Brother or whoever, look, you want to fund, you need to fund like this. Don't tell me how you think things should be and resilient kids that are dying of hunger. No, they're not resilient. I mean, they're not resilient, right? So I think I'm very much with many colleagues يعني, in خضة Beirut, especially after the explosion, and not thinking only of migration, but part of it is working with refugees, about developing models that work in education, in health, in local businesses that are inclusive. Okay, and the issue of the human side, about it not being instrumental, I'm going to say something very materialistic. Let's make it instrumental, meaning let us use the human story to make sure that policies and programmings are taking into account. That's not why I raised it. I raised it because we all care. But let us find a way to make it instrumental by saying what you are saying, Jama. Look, we can do this the good way, or we can do this the bad way. We can do it the right way and be inclusive, or we can do it the bad way and be prone to conflict, to violence, to apathy. So I believe we can find a way to break the cycle of exploitation on both ends of the Mediterranean and create models. Like, what would be a model university, right? Bringing practitioners, bringing experts, bringing youth, like a model, a design. And I think this is needed for the whole world. These are global problems. I mean, we can have this conversation with Canada also, with the US, I mean, right? So yeah, thank you.
I think you already, Carmen, you already entered in the wrap up and conclusions, which were the last session. So with like policy recommendations and also actually like recommendations of how all of these that you were saying could work. So I would invite you to keep on this direction if you still have some, Carmen and Geha, also to react to what you already said. And I think, yes, to think about how these multi-level governance could actually work in practice, and if the idea of going beyond the Mediterranean is actually very interesting, right? Because we were thinking about the Mediterranean, how it's like totally disconnected from other regions, from other like global actors like the United States. And I also like that you mentioned the current health crisis, because I think it gave more or less states a more like permanent role, like a bit like, okay, so certain states that had a strong state have like, we see like Spain having like emergency and having the power like to control their citizens as ever, and how all of these like is developing, right, with all these additional layer of complexity that give states even more protagonism in all of these. And just an additional like reflection of questions about what you're saying, like the importance of like building at the bottom, right, and looking like who is doing it right in health and education and everything, but at the same time how we can build it back, right, to construct from the bottom to the top, because I think this connection will be also necessary, right, and this is the challenge, because of course I'm sure that really good policies and practices are being done locally, but how can we not politicize it, but make it get to the top and being the paradigm and the central narrative, and that's, I think it's the real challenge, right? That it's not anecdotal, that it's not only these institution or these health center, and then I don't know, just some ideas, and I'll leave Geha, and then Carmen, you can finalize with it, and then we can go to the Q&A, which I think you also have the opportunity to keep the discussion. So
no, I tell you the truth, I don't know, because I already launched some ideas, so I don't think this is a good wrap up, but I will insist in four main ideas. I think the, let me say, the good narrative is now, I think is not completely absent now, because it cannot be completely absent, because it's impossible nowadays to deal with migration issues without not taking into consideration, as I say at the beginning, about this solidarity and this human apathy that Carmen is having. So this is now on the plate, but I think as recommendation, we need to increase the effectivity of this narrative. So we need to make this narrative at the hardcore of the current politics. If you see this agenda for the Mediterranean, when they talk about migration, this narrative, it doesn't exist 100%. It exists 5%, 10%. So we need to fight to provide with this positive narrative in the new agenda of migrations to be dealt by everyone. But I insist, I think that for one reason or the other, the regions and local authorities have been leading with this compatibility of this more open or friendly or human narrative on the matter. So let's them also participate and encourage them to not be una flor de un día, no? Let's them also to participate and to encourage them to put this message, no? I repeat, this letter of 20 regions of Europe addressed to the European Commission, for me it's a unique, something very interesting, or the examples that we give about some city councils like Barcelona. Let's try that this message, positive narrative, being at the end of the day, part of the politics that is not at that moment. It's a narrative apart. So we need to face for this. The second is, let's put the instruments. If we don't have projects and funds, no vamos a hacer nada. So we need, not that we need money, no? You know, the Catalans are always talking about that we need funding for all, well, not deliveries. But no, it's not only about this. It's that if you don't provide with instruments, you will never know about the efficiency of these authorities or these institutions. So provide them the possibility to funds, because it will be demonstrated as far how far this responsibility will be applied. So for me at that moment, we cannot evaluate the performance of these local and regional because they don't have the instruments to perform on this. And finally, I fully agree about the thing that Carmen say about multi-level and multi-sectorial or multi-whatever. And this es muy importante because we always talk about decentralization, about a multi-level that is just to put together. No, we need to work with complexity, and to be much more effective with our instruments at a local level, we need to work with this governance, multi-level, multi-sectorial, and this is not easy, and nowadays it's not easy. And this is a governance issue. So all our political science need also to provide some clues and some concepts that out of the box, because if we are not innovative, we will be always again and again with instruments not taking this into account. I don't think Luisa, I give you clear things, but at least have some reflections, no? After all.
Thank you very much, Gemma. I'll just let Carmen to give a last, and then we can pass to we have some time for questions.
Yeah, thank you, Luisa. I hope this is the start of a conversation that we can learn a lot from each other. And for me, like the recommendations would be maybe to design. I mean, I hear you well about the instruments, but I also hear you that it doesn't take money to model an example. Maybe one way to think about this is to choose the already converted, like partners who are already kind of interested, to start with the easy ones, like a city here, a school here, a university there, right? I mean, we are already saying, okay, let's have this multi-expertise discussion, etc. Let us have it. Maybe we could start with the most converted, the easiest, document it, create out of it a model, and share it. And I think when we decentralize the problem, then you can connect with colleagues and advisors or peers outside of the Euro-Mediterranean, because if you do like school, then surely you can find schools in the US that you can say, okay, how did you manage? I mean, not about migration, but I have many colleagues in the US during Black Lives Matter who reached out and they said, how did you manage during the revolution, right? So we were like exchanging this global South, global North, but we were not discussing the political system, the funding. I mean, they are in fancy universities, I'm in a poor country, but this university level classroom, we could exchange. So maybe around migrants and refugees, and there is a comment on inclusion, we could find good models of inclusion, bad models of exclusion, and get them to talk to each other and make sure, as you said, Gemma, always the high level conversation has to be everybody. It has to be jobs and health and education and transportation and gender. It cannot be one thing at a time. I feel like the world, especially after COVID, is going to be too fast for us. We cannot sit and just speak to ourselves. We need to bring in the partners who will see it from a different perspective. So yeah, I hope this is a start of a longer term conversation. And thank you so much.
Thank you very much, you both, for this amazing debate. And I think how Carmen starts is just the start. And I think we don't have time, enough time here to tackle all the issues and everything that you raised, but I think it's a very good starting point. And since we don't have a lot of time and this is like online, I would encourage the audience that is still out there to put their questions, and so I can put to them. Unfortunately, they are all written and we cannot see their faces, but we'll wait. We have 3 questions so far made by Ricardo Zapata. Maybe we can start with that and then see if other people also give us some inputs. So sorry, I have to read it. I'll read it out loud so you can also. So what is your views about the EU pact within this Mediterranean scenario? How far the consequences of Arab Spring may play a positive, negative role in this scenario building process in the Mediterranean? And specifically to Gemma, in what way she understands that a young person from Barcelona and one from Beirut have the same expectations in life. I believe that someone like myself from Catalonia, I have many more opportunities. This seems to me a too homogeneous view on the region's youth and its expectation. Could you clarify these, please? Thank you. So if you would like to start with these 3 questions.
Gemma, I think on the EU pact, Gemma, yeah.
Bueno, about the EU pact, I think at the beginning, a starting point, I say this, no? The EU pact as a response, as a first response from my point of view regarding the questions we are talking today, has a positive, some positive points that for the first time put a little bit this external dimension, this focus about the partnership with the third countries, this idea that we should deal with this deal of migration in a more, let me say, partnership point of view. But it's still not solving the key issues that for us are necessary and evident, no? So it's still far away from the needs to be much more effective on the starting by that no references of what regional and local actors can be or how they can access to the instruments and the funds more easy. This is because the discussion, and still with this narrative of prevention and security still there in a way that is not balanced with working much more in this idea of integration, inclusion, or some words that are not very well explained. So just in general, regarding regional and local authorities, the pact, the European Pact is not responding to what the needs are. But it's true that it's opening some windows, opportunities to deal with better. When we translate this in the new Mediterranean agenda, nothing new under the sun, no? So just a little bit of these clues, we need to work on it, and two, I think, to stress the need of the programs that will be launched take this possibility to work at the regional and local level in a more efficient way. So we have this opportunity, the new programs and the new financing, because the narrative still is in the same level.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Luisa? Would you like me to comment on the Arab Spring?
No, just wanted. Yes, yes, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, so very quickly, and this is a long discussion, not to be answered in 2 minutes. I'm not somebody that is very nostalgic in my political analysis. I think that we are not in a revolutionary moment right now, and I think that the way that it affects migration is that you have a generation of young people that are frustrated and or securitized because they participated in dissent, particularly in Lebanon and Syria. And I think these are the voices that we need to think about and listen to. But for, for better or for worse, I wish we were. We are not in an Arab Spring moment anymore. It has resulted in what it has resulted. I think that we are in a moment of a restoration of minimum human dignity, so we can see what the future will look like and what kind of fights we will have. We don't know what the economy will look like in these countries. We have no idea, the Syrian lira and the Syrian pound and the Lebanese lira. So I don't feel that we are in a revolutionary moment, and I don't like to kind of keep bringing this paradigm, this is how we look at the region, authoritarian regimes and uprisings. I think that, like Geha said, we have to be more complex. It's a more complex reality, and until not just the youth, all of us can stand on our feet in this region, we don't know what will be the shape of dissent and confrontation. I don't know if this answered it, but I wanted to say it because I have been practicing it for many, many months.
Thank you, Carmen. I don't know if Geha wants to comment on the question of the Eve.
From Ricardo.
Yeah.
Very quick, because I think I understand the question. Of course, I expect from his point of view this idea of no, we are different, of course, and the diversity of situations. First of all, Ricardo, I'm not talking about you and me. I'm talking about young people, because most probably you, me, and Carmen is younger, but another person of my age in Lebanon, still we have this pattern different. I'm not talking neither about homogenization. I'm just talking that about expectations, in the sense that young people, and this I experienced myself working at the Annalyn Foundation, working a lot with youth and all these matters. I realize how similar, it's like talking about women, that we are all different, but at the end of the day, so the young people nowadays, they are access to a global reality that is common for everyone. So the circumstances provide you this different environment where you need to grow up and you need to deal with, and even you are different the one from the other. But for me, this is my opinion, according to my intercultural experience, I think we are much more, the young people has much more similarities. Not, the differences are not because I am in Lebanon or in Barcelona. These are my circumstances. The similarities is my generation and my view of the global sphere and my participation in the global trends that I am participating. So my circumstances make me different. But of course, I cannot tell this to someone like you that know much better than me, and you are a specialist on that. But what I want to translate as main idea is that it's important to understand that we are not different because we are living like this. We are much more similar in terms of potential and the way we are looking at the things. And in this regard, I just finished with a Lebanese expert also an article about the state of play of the after revolutions in the Arab world and in the European side. No? And so you can see how similarities about young people in the north and the south in some demands about, I don't know, freedom or experience of life, or this is what I am referring about expectations, nothing else and nothing more. But I'm sure that I didn't reply exactly, but I want to stress, because for me, it has been a surprise to understand how similar the young people in one side or another are participating in the common, I don't know, vision of things nowadays. And this is important to take into account, I think.
We have another question, this time for Carmen. That you mentioned many times how the narrative of resilience can actually be harmful for the migrant and refugee population. Would you propose an alternative narrative that might reverse that harm, or would you just erase that term?
From an activist perspective, yeah, I propose looking at constructive resistance and the literature around resistance and how people are able to resist oppression, build alternatives, support each other. There is a big literature. One of them is Rebecca Solnit on hope in the dark, how people come together in times of disaster. So maybe things like solidarity, resistance, because when you have a political system such as the one in Lebanon that is discriminating, and you decide to do well, you decide to love your neighbor, to support, then you are resisting, right? These are from an activist perspective. From a policy perspective, I don't know. I will have to think about it. But definitely, and I'm not the only one saying this. Dr. Muna Atisha has an article, I think, in the New York Times about young people in the States and African American communities. And she said, enough, I don't want to hear this word again, because what we're telling them is that you live in bad cities, but great, you're alive. And I think that we have to replace resilience with maybe solidarity and resistance, because you are choosing to go to school or to work or to fight to resist what basically everybody is telling you you're going to fail. So I like that word better.
Thank you very much, Carmen. Very clear answer. Gemma, would you like to comment on that too, from the new perspective?
From the activist perspective, I fully agree. No, resilience is a terminology that has, I think, the meaning of it has, but it's true that we need to go ahead with other way to be much. I like the idea of construction and proactivism, and not to put all the idea of resilience on the shoulders of the poor society, because it's something that it's at the end of the day is assuming that you have or you live in a problem and that you need to be just for this problem. The resistance and construction at least give you this this proactive point, no? I don't know.
And it puts the onus, the effort, like when we talk about women's economic participation, the onus of resilience is on individual women, individual families. And when we're saying resilience is not a bad word, it's a good thing, but we're saying it's been used to put the effort, the onus on community. We're saying let's work on structures that will help communities, survive. Mm-hmm. If communities happen to survive and they tell a story, it's probably because they are resisting.
Another very interesting word in our conversation today, I think, is the idea of community, because sometimes we are with this local region, no sé qué, and in this case, I think community give you exactly the sense of the idea of a group of people having the same objective or to dealing with the same context, in the same context. So community provides more flexibility in this multi-level, let me say, discussion. I think community is a right concept to be used for our approach. It will provide more opportunities, but I let to you and to Ricard the opportunity to think about this. But I think community is interesting to use more in this multi-level, whatever we want to construct.
I like community, and it's inclusive, right? And it's not bound by geography, and it's not bound by where you are in the world, right? So for you, your homework, Gemma, is the community of transdisciplinary experts to get people from everywhere. That's gonna be your community. Yeah,
exactly. Right.
Just to, I really liked how we started from a very maybe ignorant or even more academic framework, and then we have come up with all these, not come up, but put at the center these other terms and important concepts like community, constructive resistance, solidarity, and the individual, right? And I think that's the idea of the debate, like how we raise all these new and important conclusions. But just to finalize, I have just a new question that came up, and maybe it's interesting just as a final reflection. And is from Maricha, and she's asking about, is there a need to foster a Mediterranean identity to help build solidarity? So maybe to wrap up with the other concept of identity, since the era of the Union of Mediterranean, it seems the idea has lost currency. So if there's even a Mediterranean identity that we can talk about within this idea of community and
Me, I think also Ricard and the work of Yemet and the group that we share with Luisa, we are Mediterranean, well, I am a Mediterranean activist. So I consider always that Mediterranean provide us a frame to encourage better, let me say, better things. So, of course, the Union for the Mediterranean is just, is a very important instrument, but it's an instrument, but this is not an identity. The identity of Mediterranean, it's a lot. And it's something that time pass and it's rebuilt and revealed, no? From Brodel till nowadays, it is a lot of Mediterraneans on board. So I do agree that Mediterranean reflection is a moving concept. So in this global war, we need a reconstruction of what does it mean to be Mediterranean. We feel Mediterranean. In Catalonia, we are Mediterranean. And this is why we are close to our Lebanese, let me say, because we are constructing this to feel much more comfortable of whatever. But I think Mediterranean concept and notion and community, as Luisa say, need to be dynamic, a dynamic construction. So what happened? That our main instrument in Europe and in the Mediterranean, that is all this Euro-Mediterranean, whatever, are not like the ones 25 years ago. 25 years ago, we launched an idea to be a partners for better future, to have the concept of Carmen. Now, 20 days after, this not happen and it's not expected that nobody will lead on this, on that. But it doesn't mean that because the revolutions, because the situation in these societies, we are not really activists in thinking that something needs to be happened. So this is why we are working very hard that this Mediterranean construction give us and provide us a better future. Don't know if I reply to your question or answer, but I think we need not to expect that the institutions will provide us the framework. Mediterranean starting point is a way of life, is a feeling, is a sensation, and is a community. If this doesn't work, Mediterranean doesn't exist. So needs to be now adapted to this new global diversity era that provide us these contradictions, that you can be similar to another with your different background. So yes, Mediterranean activist I am, and I think, but in a very dynamic way. I'm not institutionally. We have what we have, but I think a lot of things to be done in this frame. Yes. No sé, Carmen, all of you. Don't tell me now that you are not Mediterranean.
No, I totally agree. I totally agree. Probably I'm more Catalonia than you. No, I agree. I think community builds identity. Identity is not something somebody gives you. I think community is shared experience. Absolutely what you said, Gemma. I agree.
Vale, porque si no.
Claro que sí.
So we have, I don't know how you are in time, but we have a last question if you want to ask a question, answer very quickly. I don't know if you, it's from Maria, and she asked, what are your thoughts on countries such as Poland, Hungary, and Slovakia, which have a clear anti-migration speech, especially, I guess, towards people from Syria? I don't know if it goes too far away from what we were talking, or if you want to comment on that.
I don't have expertise on this. Clearly, I'm for refugees. I'm for refugee rights and migration, but I don't have expertise on the region.
I didn't understand the question, Luisa.
Yeah, she's asking about your thoughts on countries such as Poland, Hungary, and Slovakia, and that have a clear anti-migration speech.
This is this narrative that we are talking that we need to face. Of course, our politics in Europe now is what all of us, I think we know, are not a construction of. They need to equilibrate all these issues, and this is why we don't have the best. We have the best of the medium term, no, and this is why we need to be activists in our fight, because there is other if you allow me, dark forces that provides the European coherence a little bit affected by this. So this is why it's neat. There is one of the questions, of the issues that it's now reinforced by the Pact of Migration, that is the solidarity between the European affected countries. So I think it's not only solidarity between the European affected countries, it's also the opportunity to convince to everyone. So the easy policies is when you think the same. The policy starts when you need to convince the others that are not thinking the same. So this is the political work that our European leaders need to build on this matter.
Well, that's politics, and
Exactly,
and that's why we have entered on that, just because it's a polemic. Otherwise, we should be just having a nice chat. But anyway, I would like to thank you a lot for you both for this wonderful debate. I enjoyed it very much, and I think and I hope it's just the start of conversation between you two and between your institutions and us and everyone else that is interested. And yeah, thanks again, EMED, for always hosting us and our debates. And I hope I can see you in other projects and hear about these unfolding in very nice initiatives and dialogues or whatever. So thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, IEMD, and we'll talk soon. Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Bye, Gemma. Thank you very much. Thank you, Luisa.
Bye.
Thank you, Ricard.
Bye.
Bye,
Thank
Luisa.
you. Bye. Thank you.